Hello and thank you for joining me. Today we are going out into the wild and foraging our own ingredients. The special ingredient in question is ramson or wild garlic. It is easily one of the most popular springtime ingredients to forage for veterans to newcomers alike. And with the increased interest in wild ingredients and chefy menus becoming more prevalent, it is now fairly well known. I'll take you out into the woods and show you how to gather the wild garlic, and then I will show you a few of my favorite ways to use it. It is easy to understand the popularity of this ingredient. It's pretty easy to ID, and it has a lot of personality. That being said, as with any foraging, you must take some consideration to make sure you're keeping yourself safe, and to also make sure you're respecting the land that you're gathering it from. For clarity, I am in Denmark currently, so I am gathering ramson, as that is the wild garlic species native to Europe and Asia. If you are watching in North America, then you will be looking out for ramps. Taste-wise, they are pretty similar, but ramps have a bigger bulb end. And as with foraging for mushrooms, you have to be on the lookout for varieties that look very similar but are actually poisonous. The one plant that people commonly mistake for wild garlic is lily of the valley. But don't be scared. Just make sure you familiarize yourself online with some pictures beforehand. While the green leaves do look similar, the flowers make it very easy to tell the two apart. Ramson flowers are pointed and tight clusters, where the lily of the valley have little bell-shaped flowers that sort of droop down. And beyond that, the other dead giveaway is the smell. Pick a batch of ramson and drive home with it in your car. If your car isn't reeking of onion by the time you get home, you probably don't have the right thing. Now, this is a wild ingredient, so I'm going out into the woods to gather it. Wilderness is a bit of an overstatement, but it's nice to get a little bit out of the city and get some fresh air and chat with the locals a little bit. I am lucky enough to have a friend who shared the location of his secret patch with me, and that is where I usually go every season. But if you don't have a secret patch, you may have to do some hunting. This patch is very bountiful and can provide way more than I need. That being said, I still want to be respectful and not be greedy. Once I'm in the cluster, I get out my little knife, and I aim for the biggest stalks that I can find. I cut close to where the plant emerges from the ground. Cutting them like this is the most respectful way to gather ramson. Why? Because ramps and ramson will grow back the following season, but only if the bulb end is left intact. Unfortunately, many chefs covet the bulb end, and irresponsible foragers who can make quick cash in the spring are happy to sell it to them. And with ramps now having an almost mainstream popularity, it's easy for the demand to lead to wild patches being completely devastated, as can be seen in places like the Hudson Valley. This is the dark side. Foraging can go from a fun little outdoor activity to a selfish, destructive act pretty quickly. So proceed thoughtfully. Eventually I gather a nice amount, and I'm ready to retreat from the forest. Before I was out of the woods, however, I attempted to cross a ditch by walking on an old tree limb, which promptly snapped and scraped my leg as I fell. Perhaps it was the spirit of the woods trying to remind me not to mess around with it. At any rate, back at the ranch, we can now take a look at some of my favorite ways to enjoy these garlicky greens. But before any of that happens, you will need to clean them. Get yourself a nice big bowl of cold water, toss some of them in, and give them a rinse. In my experience, it's not so much the dirt you have to worry about, but the random bits of forest floor debris that get caught up in the plants. Yet another reason to leave the bulbs. So much less effort when it comes to cleaning. After washing, just give them a spin in a salad spinner or pat them dry with a clean kitchen towel. Now let's start with something super basic and make a ramson pesto. I use my food processor to make life easy, and I'm starting with the nuts, in my case, toasted almonds, but you could certainly use pine nuts, walnuts, or even pecans can be nice. I've got about 50 grams here, that's about a third of a cup, and I just want those to pulse in the machine to give them a chance to break up before I go in with the greens. And once they've been pulverized a bit, I go in with a couple handfuls of the wild garlic, stems, flowers, and all. That's about 100 grams. I keep pulsing the machine until those are broken up a bit, and I think that wild garlic can benefit from a bit of acid, so I'm also going in with a squeeze of lemon juice and a pinch of salt and a good glug of olive oil. I'll end up using about a whole half a cup of oil in total, around 120 milliliters. And once I get that to a nice consistency, I take it out of the bowl of the machine and add some grated Grana Padano cheese. That's about 40 grams. I'm giving measurements for guidance, but this is the kind of thing you can really eyeball and adjust as you like. And that is all there is to it. And of course, one of the best ways to enjoy pesto is in a pasta. So that's what I did. I add in some asparagus to really kick up the spring energy, and I just mix that in until everything is nicely coated. And of course, I saved myself some pasta water, so this process is easy. And there you have it, a very earthy green bowl of pasta. But let's say you want to go the extra mile and make your own pasta. Well, that could open up some more opportunities to use up some of the wild garlic in another way. Pick your favorite spinach pasta recipe online and replace the spinach with ramson. This is especially easy if you have a nice high-power blender. Then you just make your beautiful green dough. You roll it out, and then the shapes are up to you. I took some of the dough and made it into fettuccine. And with some of the remaining dough, I made spaghettini. Both look really beautiful in my opinion. And because this is fresh pasta, I just finished it simply with some butter, pasta water, and a bit of pecorino romano cheese because I feel that that matches the funkiness of the ramps more than Parmesan. And if you're feeling ambitious, you can even make some ravioli. The world is your oyster. This kind of application really shows you the flexibility of the green. You can do the same thing when other recipes call for spinach. For instance, you could saute some up and stuff a chicken galantine with ramson. Don't be afraid to explore. Returning to the world of carbohydrates, you can also consider incorporating your wild garlic into bread. In this example, I'm using a focaccia as my base, but you can use your favorite recipe. I got a poulish started, and when that was active and ready, I got my dough together, chopping up a good couple handfuls of ramson and adding it to the base dough. I then follow the standard protocol of kneading, folding, resting, proofing, and eventually it was time to do the final shaping. And in case we didn't have enough wild garlic in it already, let's go ahead and chop up some more and add it to the top of the dough along with some olive oil before it goes off to the oven to bake. And after the bake, it's looking pretty nice. You get a bit of the chewy greens in the bread itself, and then a bit of the contrast with the crispy bits on top. Not enough ramson for you? Well, you can always eat it with a bit of that ramson pesto you made earlier. Moving on, as with many special ingredients with short-lived seasons, one of the simplest ways to preserve them is to pickle them. This method pops up more often with the North American ramps because they have a fatter stalk, and so it's more practical, but it's still very possible with ramson. For this, I try to choose the biggest stems that I can from my batch, and I just chop them up finely, and truthfully I don't mind having some greens in the mix as well. Then I have some pickle liquid here that has already been cooled, and that is super easy to make if you remember the 3-2-1 ratio. That is 3 parts of water to 2 parts vinegar to 1 part sugar, and I normally add a pinch of salt for good measure. And you can go crazy with the spices, but I prefer keeping it pretty plain so that the flavor of the wild garlic is the star. Once you have your ramson dice covered in pickle liquid in a container, the flavor will take a day or so to settle, but then it'll keep in the fridge for weeks. And this tastes good on just about anything, from pork chops to crudo dishes, so just have fun playing around with it. And speaking of versatile condiments, another great way to use wild garlic is to make yourself a riff on chimichurri, replacing the parsley with wild garlic. So not a proper chimmy, but a sort of semi-chimmy, if you will. Start with a base of vinegar, shallots, and a bit of chili. Then add in plenty of chopped ramson, a bit of dry oregano if you like, and a generous amount of olive oil until everything goes fluid enough to be spooned. And like the pickled ramps, this really can be used on many different things, but if we are looking to the Argentinians for inspiration, it is particularly good with grilled meat and vegetables. And that is where I will call it a day for this video, though rest assured there are still plenty of other ways to explore this ingredient. You could ferment them like sauerkraut. I did that last year and still have some in the fridge waiting for the perfect opportunity. And we didn't talk about it today, but once the flowers go to seed, it's a bit of work, but plucking these and salt pickling them will give you a really great ingredient. If you are curious about some of these deeper dives, check out Chef Joe Bartlett on social media for some great simple recipes for wild garlic and beyond. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this look at some of my favorite simple ways to make the most of wild garlic season. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe while you're at it. There are a lot of great videos like this in the archives and plenty more on my hard drive waiting to be edited, so join in now. It's free. And don't be shy in the comments if you have any questions or want to share something about your own experience with wild garlic. And just to reiterate, when gathering ingredients from publicly shared spaces, be respectful to the land and to the other people who might want to enjoy the bounty of the season. Until next time, cheers!